So why do we even have rules? I mean, why do we need a government telling us what we can and can't do? Today we're going to dive into one of the most powerful and maybe controversial answers ever given from the mind of the 17th century philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Let's just start with a little thought experiment. I want you to picture a world with absolute, total freedom. No laws, no police, nobody to answer to. Sounds kind of like a paradise, doesn't it? Well, Hobbes had a very different vision. He saw something much, much darker at the end of that road. All right, so let's explore Hobbes' starting point. This world without any rules, what he famously called the state of nature. For Hobbes, this whole story begins in a really surprising place, with equality. Now, he's not talking about moral equality, but something far more, well, brutally practical. He argues that, yeah, sure, some people are stronger or smarter than others, but when it all boils down, the weakest has strength enough to kill the strongest, whether they do it through some secret plot or just by ganging up with others. The bottom line is, in this world, nobody is truly safe. And this is where the logic takes a really fascinating turn. Because we're all roughly equal in our power to hurt each other, we also have an equal hope of getting what we want. So, if you and I both want the same thing, the same piece of land, the same food, and we can't both have it, Hobbes says we don't just become rivals, we become enemies. It's inevitable. And this conflict isn't just random chaos. Hobbes actually pinpoints 3 core psychological drivers for it. First up, you've got competition. We attack other people for our own gain. Second, diffidence, which is basically just this constant gnawing mistrust of everyone else. We attack for our own safety, because hey, it's better to get them before they get you. And third, glory. We invade for reputation, fighting over the smallest insults just to make sure everybody knows we're not to be messed with. So let's put it all together. You have a world of equals all wanting the same stuff, and all driven by gain, fear, and reputation. Where does that lead? Well, for Hobbes, it all builds to one terrifying conclusion. And look, this isn't just somebody's interpretation. This is straight from the source. You can see right here, on this slide, Hobbes' own handwritten notes in the margins of his original manuscript. And he writes it plain as day. Without a civil power, men are in a condition of war. Now, this war he's talking about, it isn't necessarily nonstop fighting. It's the constant threat of it. It's the knowledge that violence could erupt at any moment. And in that kind of environment, everything we think of as human progress just stops. I mean, why would you bother farming if someone can just come and take your food? Why build a nice house? Why create art or study science? There's just no point. And all of this leads to Hobbes' most famous and maybe the most chilling summary of life in this state of nature. Without some common power to keep us all in line, the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Okay, so that's pretty bleak. But Hobbes doesn't just leave us in this nightmare scenario. He argues that we actually have the tools to get ourselves out, and we forge this escape not through more violence, but through reason. It turns out that while some of our passions, our emotions, lead us straight into war, other more powerful ones actually push us toward peace, and chief among them is the fear of a violent death. We also want the things that make life comfortable, and we have this hope that we can get them through our own hard work. These feelings are the motivation we need to find a better way. Now, to understand how we make this escape, we've got to get 2 of Hobbes' key terms straight. First, there's the right of nature. You can think of this as the absolute, no-holds-barred liberty everyone has to do whatever it takes to survive, even if it means hurting other people. But then there's a law of nature, and that's a rule discovered by reason that tells us we have an obligation to seek out peace because that's the best way to survive. So it's this fundamental clash between total freedom and rational self-preservation. Reason gives us a whole series of these laws, these rules for survival. So let's start with the first one, because it's the most important of all. The first law of nature is basically to seek peace and follow it. But, and this is a huge but, it has a critical second part. When you can't get peace, you have every right to use all helps and advantages of war to defend yourself. It's a really pragmatic command. Try for peace, but don't be a fool about it. So, if peace is the goal, how do we actually get there? I mean, what's the mechanism? That's where the second law of nature comes in. The solution here is kind of like the golden rule, but with a crucial security guarantee. You have to be willing to give up your right to everything, your absolute freedom,
if and only if other people are willing to do the exact same thing. We all agree to limit our own freedom at the same time, and in exchange, we get security from each other.
But an agreement is really just a promise, isn't it? How do you make it actually stick? Well, that's the final piece of the puzzle, how this abstract idea of an agreement becomes the concrete foundation for all of society and for justice itself.
Hobbes calls this mutually agreement a covenant. It's really just a special kind of contract where we all mutually transfer our rights. I agree to give up my right to attack you, and in exchange, you agree to give up your right to attack me.
But this brings us right back to the central problem, doesn't it? We're all self-interested. What's to stop me from making that promise today and then, breaking it the second it benefits me?
Hobbes's answer is brutally blunt. Without some power there to enforce them, covenants are in vain and but empty words. Promises are totally worthless because the temptation to break them for our own gain is just too strong. Words alone can't hold us back.
And this is exactly why the third law of nature is so important. Hobbes calls it the very origin of justice, and the law itself is simple. You have to keep the promises you make.
And this leads to a really powerful conclusion. For Hobbes, the words just and unjust literally have no meaning back in the state of nature. They only come into existence after we make these covenants. So for him, injustice is simply breaking a contract. And justice? It's keeping it.
And this is the final, crucial piece of the whole argument. For justice to mean anything, for our covenants to actually be valid, there has to be some coercive power, a government, that's strong enough to compel us to keep our promises. The fear of the punishment for breaking the deal has to be greater than any benefit you might get from cheating. And that, right there, is why we need the state.
So, we're left with Hobbes's fundamental trade-off. We surrender that terrifying, absolute freedom of the state of nature so that we can gain security and peace. And it leaves us with a question we're all still grappling with today. Is a life of absolute freedom really worth the price of constant fear?